Good evening, everyone. This is LM Clock bringing you another episode of Short Stories. Today, I'll be reading a short for you entitled Roybi. I hope you enjoy it. Past the hollow forest to the east, a mountain range stretched for miles. Legend says this is where the moon fell when she broke her heart. Her body swelled into a giant in an attempt to contain the sadness she felt. But no matter how big she grew, her heart still betrayed her. In these mountains now dwell the Dalaktai clan. This race of mountain people were once related to the satyrs of the olden times, and still had the cloven hoofs to aid them in moving about the steep mountain cliffs. Here, in this village, lived a young Dalaktai named Roybi. Roybi was the youngest daughter of Sendri, a tear-gatherer. Today, Roybi was set to follow in her father's footsteps, and learn the traditions of gathering the goddess's tears. She woke early that morning, and wrapped herself in the bright white robes. She had never been in anything so white before. High in the mountain the dust covers everything. All her clothes had long since faded to brown. She struggled with her belt, and could only hope she looked the part. She had watched her father prepare for the hike many times. Now she did her best to imitate his movements and dressing. The flap to her tent pulled away, and her father stepped in. The sound of his hoofs on the rock below announced his presence. "You look beautiful, young fawn. Are you ready to pray?" he said to her. Roybi still fiddled with her belt, but smiled anyway, and nodded her head. Sendri led her from her small tent to the large gathering tent in the center of the village. Inside sat 20 or so of her clan, all dressed in the same white robes. They were kneeling in a circle, speaking silent prayers to the goddess. Roybi knelt beside her father. She had been studying the prayers since she was 10. Now, at the age of 13, she knew them by heart. She thanked the goddess for her sadness. She thanked her for her tears. Then the leader of their expedition began praying out loud. He told the story of the goddess torn between two lovers, her heartbreak as she had to choose. This was the first heartbreak the world had ever known. It carried such sadness that it drove the moon to the ground, where she wept for an eternity. As Roybi listened, she started to cry herself. She looked to her father for guidance, and saw the trails of tears on his face as well. When their leader had finished speaking, the congregation dried their eyes on their sleeves. Roybi stood up next to her father and began following the line of others as they made their way around the tent. As she reached the far wall, Chendri pulled down a water skin and strapped it to his back. Roybi took the next in line, but it was just a little big for her. Her father took it from her and passed it along with a smile on his face. "Here, this one's more your size," he said, handing her a smaller skin. Roybi took the skin and slipped her arms in the loops. Then she tied the belt across her chest. Before long they were on their way. The village was nestled into a valley, but was still very far up the mountain range. The journey would take them 3 days, during which they would not eat, and fast for their goddess's pain. Roybi found the first day easy, and by the end of it they had reached the Sorrow Caves. The troop sat down to make camp for the night. Roybi found it difficult to sleep. The wind blew through the caves, and was followed by a mournful cry. Roybi knew this was just the wind, but it sounded so sad. Before long, though, Sendri was tapping her shoulder, waking her for the new day. Roybi was hungry, but she imagined everyone was. This was the sacrifice they made. They walked on until the sun was high in the sky. All Roybi's life she had only ever seen the brown dust and gray rock of her village. Only the tear-gatherers were allowed to venture into this sacred land. Roybi's eyes grew wide as she saw, for the first time, green moss-covered stones. She marveled at the flowers that grew out of cracks. Often her father would bring her one from his trips, but to see it alive and rooted was something she could only imagine. Chendri called to her not to fall behind, and she darted to keep up. As they made their way through another pass, Roybi saw the face of the goddess, a towering mountain that looked like a woman's face on its side. From the one visible eye high on the cliff, a waterfall flowed. The gatherers began unhooking their water skins and stepping into the stream. Roybi was so mesmerized by the awesomeness of what she was seeing that she had completely forgotten why she came. "Come, Roybi, we don't want to miss the feast," her father said. The thought of food jolted her back from her trance. She pulled the water sack from her back and began filling it in a thin stream. One after another, each gatherer took turns, and with full water skins would sit in the moss to make their small camps. Roybi followed their lead and made her small camp next to her father. Tomorrow they began their trip back. Roybi knew the feast well. It was the grand celebration her tribe had once every 3 moons to celebrate the refilling of the water. There wasn't a lot of food, but enough to go around. The gatherers always got first choice. Roybi slipped easily into sleep that night, dreaming of food and listening to the sound of falling water. The track back would not be as easy as the walk here. Thank you for listening to this recording of Roybi. If you liked it, then please, by all means, leave a like, and you can subscribe to me in all the links down below. Thank you again, and I hope you have a fantastic evening.